Sir, the various amendments that have been proposed mostly refer to Pakistan, whether it is a question of exchange of population in that region or elsewhere, or some kind of territorial redistribution, or whether it is simply an annulment of the partition. I must confess that when I read with such proposals or resolutions passed by responsible people, I begin to wonder whether they are sane. Something must be wrong somewhere, and naturally, as I cannot examine my own mental apparatus, I suspect that of the others has gone wrong. Now, if people talk on an annulment of the partition in connection with the Bengal problem or the refugees problem, it raises a number of issues. One of them, of course, is that they are prospering something which involves a war on a prodigious scale. Even if we go through with such a war, what will happen after it is too terrible to contemplate, and in any case, a hostile approach is of no help to the minorities. Now, with all difference, I would like each honorable member to consider how is either an individual member of the minority community or the minority community as a whole going to be helped in this way, a way that involves conflict on a large scale means that the first victims of that conflict will be the minorities themselves. It also involves journal uprooting and upsetting without doing anything to produce the condition for rehabilitation we talk so much about. By the time the way of war bears fruit, the minorities or a good part of them may cease to exist. Every one of the proposals I have received involves an upheaval, a conflict, and sometimes, though not always, war. Of course, you may say that everything that is in the national interest is worthwhile. You may be willing to pay a heavy price for it. I can understand that argument even though I do not agree with it. You cannot say that your proposals will help the minorities because what you suggest will in fact only cause them the greatest possible distress, and possibly much worse, it will uproot them completely. Now, take the proposal regarding the exchange of population. I ventured to describe it some months ago as a complete, impracticable, and fantastic proposal. I would like to repeat that it is fantastic and impracticable, and that this government will have nothing to do with it. Furthermore, it is completely opposed to our political, economic, social, and spiritual ideals. If you want to have an exchange of population, then you must change the whole basis of not only this government but of all that we have stood for these 30 odd years and during the movement for freedom in this country. Honorable Deputy Chairman Sir, just to give a little perspective, special economic zones were earlier being operated through rules that were formulated until 2004. Around 2003, rules were made, various policy initiatives taken, and special economic zones were run all across the country. However, sometime in 2005, the then finance minister and the government of the day realized that it was extremely difficult to generate confidence in the international market until we made a law. Therefore, in 2005, the SAGE law was formulated. It was approved by both the houses, and since then, SAGE have been governed by the said law. When it was formulated, this law allowed various entities to invest in these zones. It could be proprietorship, partnership, private limited, or public limited companies, and so on. So, various instrumentalities or entities were allowed to invest in these economic zones. At that point of time in 2005, trust as an investment vehicle did not exist. Trust usually come in the form of alternative investment funds in which several people pool in their capital. The trust invest in many businesses or any venture, and the returns from that go to the various stakeholders in the proportion of their investment. There has been a thinking in the government for several years. I am given to understand that even when the erstwhile government was in place or our earlier government was there, the thinking was that India should gradually promote international financial centers. We have such centers in London, Hong Kong, Singapore, and New York, and in international financial centers, largely investments are carried out through newer and newer investment vehicles, one of which is an entity called trust. The Reserve Bank of India defines the various entities that can invest in the international financial centers. Now we believe that should have been enough, but just like in 2005, to generate confidence among the international investor community, all these rules had to be converted into law. Full stop and